The Polkadot OpenDev Fellowship Call, the monthly call with all of our Polkadot core developers. These are the people that are logged in. They are building the Polkadot runtime, the protocol, the cloud, the hub, all the great things that we're using. They don't have to suffer through all of everything that we see on Twitter right now, all the bull posting, the stuff that keeps us busy all day and doesn't let us focus on our actual work. And it's always a pleasure to have them on this monthly call. We go through everything from core protocols to how do we put it into practice and reality. And as always, we want to start with new members. And we have a member that has been a member of the fellowship for some time, but hasn't had the opportunity yet to come to the fellowship call. And so we give a very warm welcome to Christian Langebacher. Hi, welcome, Christian.
Hello, nice to meet you all.
Hey, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro of what you're doing?
Yes, so I've basically been an ecosystem builder since 5 years. I started together with Brenzy, Alain Brenzy cover, the co-founder of Integrity and Cointer. I was building with him first the SubZero SDK, which was a Web3 Foundation grant, and then he had all these ideas about how to fund Integrity and then Cointer. And yeah, I've been basically part of his startups ever since as lead core dev. Since this winter, I'm also supporting Ayuna, one of the gaming chains we have on Polkadot. And yeah, because of this history, I made it into the fellowship, and now I thought, maybe, yeah, let's see how I can integrate myself a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you, Christian. Okay, so as every month, we have a little bit of an agenda that I put in chat for you. And as we're going to see today, I want to talk a little bit about the latest thing that we can celebrate, which is a changed inflation and reduced inflation. Maybe we can get some SubZero DevCon impressions from you, and then we can talk a little bit about Polkadot Cloud and Hub, this new way of how we are looking at Polkadot and how we can explain it to others, and see if this is also something that is usable for us here in the call. And then we are going to work through the big epics in terms of bridges, interoperability, scaling, Coretime. And if we get Gavin on the call, which is not yet sure, we can also ask a little bit about Jam. We have a few questions here, and we also have a few community questions. And Sean is telling us that Gavin will join. Yeah, so let's start with the celebration, which is Polkadot 1.3.4. It got enacted sometime over the last few days. It was executed. The OpenDev call, the governance call, was executed last week. And since yesterday, I believe, we have a reduced inflation. So Polkadot inflation was reduced from 10% to 8%. And of that 8%, 15% go to the Polkadot treasury and 85% go to stakers. So this has been a process that has been in the works for quite a few months. There was intense community debate. Core developers got involved. We had RFCs, we had a wish for change proposal, and then the actual implementation. So I think it's a really good testament to what we can do in a decentralized space. where community discussion bubbles up. It inspires people to take action, to make proposals. The Web3 Foundation also participated in the discussion through Jonas. So I think it's a really great example of how the community as a whole, our decentralized community, can come up with change that is useful for the network. I don't know, do we have anyone? I think Kian was very involved on the implementation side. Do we have anyone else here? I don't think so, who was specifically part of that implementation. Okay. Anyways, we got...
Sorry, maybe you could ask Ankan. He's here, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
Anyone want to jump in on this?
No, he said, I didn't understand the question. If you...
What was the question?
Sorry. So Polkadot 1.3.4, the inflation change. I think it was mostly Kian that was involved in the implementation of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
but you know it a bit. So, what is the question?
Yeah, just any closing comments on this? Epic, is there still outstanding work? Is it done now? Maybe reviewing the process a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what is in pipeline. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
All
I
right.
think Jan and Oliver were the guys who were taking this.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you then. Moving on, we just had SubZero for the second time this year. For the first time this year, it was in Bangkok. Now the second time, everything moved over to Bangkok, and it was SubZero Reset. So I heard it had a completely different flavor. It was the first time since I'm in Polkadot where I decided not to come SubZero. And of course, everyone celebrated it, was very happy about it. Yeah, I would be interested to hear sort of, do people here think, and maybe I can, Sean, I can call you first. Is there any interesting presentations that were there? Maybe something from DevCon that you want to share, interesting thoughts or something that really inspired you?
Yeah, I apologize ahead of time if my internet cuts out. I'm on a shitty Airbnb Wi-Fi. But I think overall, the vibes are really good. One, it was great to be have the SubZero event alongside a large Ethereum event. I think it definitely attracted some people over, especially the fact that we had like free tickets and free food and free events afterwards. Like all of that was super important to just open the doors to Polkadot to the rest of the community. And then of course set us up for a successful DevCon. And I think there were people within the Polkadot ecosystem who stayed over for DevCon, and I think that they experienced what really is what we're looking for in the long term, which is I mean, if you looked at DevCon, it was a huge stadium of people sharing the shared belief that technology can change the world for the better. And I think that you could see that pervasively. And I think that that's what we're trying to aim for. We're trying to figure out how we can put Polkadot into that room, figure out how we can make sure that people know that we're also trying to solve the same problems. And we have a lot of great technology and a lot of great insight and information about that to share with them. Mm-hmm. It's really sad to basically, there's only one Polkadot presentation, which was just one of our lawyers representing that. So we didn't really present the technology or the SDK stuff, but I hope that we will in the future. But yeah, I mean, overall, really good. And I think one of the important things I really liked about the DevCon event was they gave a lot of space to remind people there about the core values, like the cypherpunk movement, the need for decentralization, the need for actually building resilient technologies. And so really giving that as a space for people who maybe are new, rather than just jumping directly into the tech. So I think that, in the SubZero event, we could definitely adopt that kind of stuff and make sure that we start off with the primitives before we drown them in the awesome details.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. It seemed like it was a good mix of events. The pictures that I saw reminded me of cypherpunk culture, and I think people had a good time. All right, okay. Now let's get to the meaty stuff for today, and we want to start the call today with this conversation about Polkadot Cloud and Polkadot Hub, which is a proposal that you made, Sean, and gave some presentations, gave some introductions, wrote a forum post also. And I would like to start this conversation, maybe Joe, with you as the lead at Parity who is working with Asset Hub. Sometimes we refer to the projects around it as Plaza. And now we have Polkadot Hub as a concept here that could really capture it. So maybe Joe, maybe Joe, do you want to give us a little bit of your perspective on this debate and discussion, and how you would see your work and how it relates to Polkadot Hub?
Yeah, sure. So like, I guess my name ended up on the spreadsheet, but the idea kind of came from Sean. But first I'll talk about the Asset Hub part, because I want to kind of say, like, it doesn't really matter, like whether something is on Asset Hub or collectives or Bridge Hub or whatever is really just like an architectural detail. So the thing that I consider the Polkadot Hub, at least like in discussion so far, it's basically all the set of functionality in Polkadot that's not running a parachain. So in the next year, it would be smart contracts, but also like the staking, governance, all the functionality on Asset Hub, like with assets and stablecoins, but basically everything, and also like, yeah, identity and everything on the people chain. So like when you think about like hub and cloud, we're not thinking about chains. Like I think we need to break this mentality that like a product and a chain go hand in hand, right? And like it's the wrong abstraction that we're making. And like the whole idea of Polkadot from the beginning was that we can build applications that use capabilities of multiple chains. So when we think about like the hub or the cloud as an application, we shouldn't equate them with a single chain. So the clouds, like it involves buying Coretime on the Coretime chain, but it's going to involve like validation and execution on the Relay chain. And same with the hub, like you're going to use features on Asset Hub, on collectives, on people chain, and everything like this. So yeah, I don't really think about it as like sure, like a lot of these features will be on Asset Hub, but that's not really the point. Like this should never come out in any communication about hub and cloud. Yeah, I mean, I think like your original question is like, what are these things? So, and I see your next point is like kind of roadmap for the hub over the next year. So I'll pause there if you have, before going into the roadmap stuff. But I don't know, does it make sense what I said about like kind of removing Asset Hub from our vocabulary?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And it ties into these conversations and discussions we had over the last few months, where you always put pressure on that point of it shouldn't matter for the end user which chain something is on. And I think this nomenclature makes sense of saying Polkadot Hub. And if we don't need to, leave out the discussion about what's happening underneath, what's the implementation. So my understanding is, and tell me if this is right, that there will be a Hub API that basically takes care of exposing this functionality to developers so that they don't have to look into what's happening underneath. Is this right?
Yeah, so this is like, it's at least codename Facade, but like Kian threw out the name Hub API this week. So I guess I don't want to like hitch ourselves to a name at this point, but yeah, you could say like there will be a Hub API that will abstract a lot of this stuff. And like, I mean, we could do it kind of separate from the idea of this hub and cloud, but it really should have been done anyway. So like, rather than like exposing things like storage formats and palette details to UI developers, we should abstract that stuff away. So like you can kind of think even a higher level than a single palette. So like when you look at governance, for example, it's maybe 5 or 6 palettes. Like there's not a governance palette, right? You have referenda, conviction voting, and like a bunch of other ones. But like a UI is going to have to read information from all of those. And so it makes sense to have like a higher level API where you can just say like, I'm building a governance application. I want to be able to call into this API, which is going to amalgamate calls from multiple palettes. But like all these things like storage, format changes and migrations should be abstracted away from developers and definitely from end users. Like end users shouldn't have to know about like palettes and what's stored in each one.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So the debates that you had in previous months about view functions, would be sort of part of this facade. Is it correct?
Yeah, I mean, the view functions are kind of like the under the hood thing that makes this possible. And there's like a few layers to it, right? Like you have view functions in each palette to abstract away any kind of storage format issues. And then like you can build like higher level view functions on top of like a single chain runtime, like kind of with the governance example. And then you can even build like entire network functions. So if you want to say like, give me the balance of this account, it would actually look in like every chain that is configured in that API. And it would give you, either an array of all the balances with the para ID or like just a total balance. But yeah, so you can make it like appear as a single network and the view function, or as a single object, if you will. And the view functions is just like, it's an implementation detail of how we make that possible.
All right, got it. Okay, yeah, then let's go a little bit into the timeline. Anything that is new for the feathers to understand in terms of how do the next work items relate to each other?
I don't think there's anything new, at least since we put out this blog like a couple of weeks ago that I wrote. And I think you have like the main points, like, yeah, Ethereum compatibility, the minimal relay, and then like the APIs and everything that goes along with it. So I think I don't remember if, I know at one point in the draft of that article, I put timelines in, and I don't know if they got removed before we published it. But yeah, I mean, for like the Ethereum compatibility, we're probably looking at like late Q1 is like ambitious, but like Q2 next year. And yeah, the minimal relay stuff would be like kind of shifted a quarter back. So probably like late Q2, early Q3, and similar timeline for the view functions. And you can kind of move everything like a quarter earlier on Kusama. So in Q1, like a lot of the stuff should actually be happening on Kusama.
All right, got it.
I saw Sean raise his hand at some point. I don't know if you want to add something, Sean.
Oh,
It's okay. I think we passed that time.
Okay.
all right. Okay, let me check my notes. So let me get a few details on the timeline or the dependencies. So my understanding is that there is Petted Revive, and it will be the part that exposes Ethereum functionality to smart contracts written in Solidity. Now the functions like balances, staking, governance, do you have already some kind of sort order in mind in which they will be exposed? Will this happen in parallel or one after the other?
I'll give like half of the answer, and I'll let Donald give the other half. But like, as far as dependencies, we have this like kind of nice thing where like once they're all actually done, they have a lot of good composability between them, right? So like you could write a smart contract to participate in governance or to participate in staking, or like probably like it makes more sense to do these like nomination pools that can vote in governance as smart contracts instead of new palettes. So you get a lot of composability that like you wouldn't get in other ecosystems with like L2s, right? Like you can't interact with like Ethereum native staking from an L2. And so we'll get a lot of these benefits by having like both of these projects in parallel. So like the benefits of them are not completely independent, but the actual execution of them is like, it's not like deploying contracts is relying on moving staking. It'll just be nice when they're both done. So actually from like a execution standpoint, there's almost zero dependencies. Like we can work on all of these things in parallel, and one shouldn't slow down the other. As far as like, yeah, the actual like staking governance balances stuff, I'll kick that to Donald because he'll know a lot more about it.
Yeah, so we've gone to kind of great lengths to make these orthogonal to the palette contracts, but it actually kind of drops out automatically. Like it's having Palette Revive linked up to everything that's on Asset Hub right now doesn't actually affect how we implement all these things and move them over to Asset Hub. So we've got all of these things that have a balances dependency, and we're going to be moving most of them at the same time. And that's both because of like Joe said, or expanding what Joe said, it's kind of useful to have them interacting with each other. You know, having staking and governance in the same place gives you advantages of like, well, I mean, the main advantage being that your balance that is staked can also be used in governance. And when you think about all of the different balances dependencies, if you tried to lift out one palette and say, we're going to move this palette to Asset Hub this month, and then next month we'll do the next one, then at some point you would hit a case where you need to have the balance in both places because there's a crossover in locks, or there is, you know, a stake balance that is also used in governance. And so to make that easier, but also to kind of, as you know, the saying goes, rip off the band-aid, do it all in one go, do it as one orchestrated migration that lifts all of the balances, the locked reserves and all the rest of that, and replays them all on Asset Hub. And just having, we'd aim for absolutely zero balances on the relay, but there are a few things that we can kind of talk about later that mean that there will be some, there will be a balances palette on the relay, and you will be able to have a balance on the relay, but most users won't want to, and the ED will be, the existential deposit will be high to dissuade people from doing that. So yeah, basically, in answer to your question, it's all going at the same time. So there'll be this overall migrator palette, which will orchestrate the whole thing, and the internals of it are what we're kind of working out at the minute. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you for the clarification. So if I understand correctly, the Ethereum compatibility and this migration, the minimal relay work is completely separate. Doesn't really have a crossover.
Yeah.
And Joe, did I understand you correctly? Like these two are the ones that would be launching in Q2, Q3, or is it something separate?
Yeah, so probably like the Ethereum stuff in Q2 and the migration in Q3.
Got it. Very cool. Okay, so it's likely gonna be all at the same time, one big release. So yeah, good that you got those multi-block migrations figured out, right? Because this is gonna be quite a lot of work pushing this all over. Good. And so, what about the functionality like the collectives chain and Bridge Hub? Is it also gonna move over, or is it going to stay where it is?
No, that stuff will stay. I mean, like some of it, well, we've discussed moving Bridge Hub into Asset Hub, and it has like a few benefits. I see Cisco's here, maybe like he can go into more details if people want, but like the way that I see the collectives chain in particular is like it's a group of basically power users, right? Like a lot of the goal that we have in moving all the stuff to Asset Hub is to reduce friction for new users who like maybe they're just like they buy some DOT and withdraw from an exchange, and so it's much nicer to have this like lower existential deposit, lower fees, all the staking governance and stuff is in one place. And this is like it's for new users and for UI developers. Like 90% of the functionality that they're going to be doing is going to be based around this one chain. And like, sure, you could argue that there's a little bit of benefit in moving the collective stuff there as well. But the people who are members of collectives, like we kind of expect them to be like a little bit more diehards Polkadot users, right? Like it's not like some random person who just got DOT on an exchange and is withdrawing it. It's people like us in the fellowship, or like ambassador program, or whatever new fellowship emerges. And so like I think we can have a little bit higher bar for what we expect them to be able to do as users, and it is like a finite number, right? Like if you have, say, like 50 people in the fellowship and 20 people in this other program or something, like we're counting in like hundreds of people, whereas like when it comes to onboarding new users, we want to talk in like, you know, tens, hundreds of thousands or millions. So yeah, like sure, you can say like it's better, but like the benefit is extremely marginal, I think. So yeah, for most of these, we'll kind of leave it as is and like focus on moving stuff from the relay chain where we have a much bigger impact, like especially on lowering the ED.
Okay, got it. And then you know, I was thinking about the Bridge Hub. Would you consider it part of the hub, or is it a service in the Polkadot cloud?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's like a little bit on the boundary of this hub and cloud definition. Like, I mean, the way that I define or think of the cloud is like if you add a feature to it, like it should benefit everybody, right? Like, so stuff like async backing, it's part of the cloud because like, of course we can, like, it makes the system parachains more powerful, but it also makes every parachain more powerful as well. So like, that's kind of very squarely in cloud land as far as like where that feature goes. And With something like the bridge is like, yeah, it can kind of, you can argue that it's part of the cloud because like every parachain can harness this and use it, but you can also argue it's part of the hub because like UIs can like very simply just put in like, yeah, I want to bring my assets from Ethereum over into Polkadot, and like this can integrate into like other hub features very easily. So yeah, I think like this, I think the bridge is like one of these, like it's a little bit in the no man's land, but you could consider it like different parts of the bridge or like use cases for the bridge on both sides. Yeah, Sean, I don't know if you've thought about this more.
So my personal thoughts on this are that it's kind of a moot point.
Well, yeah, I think
It's just part of the Polkadot proposition. Like if there, like we shouldn't look at so far we've looked at the bridge as like a discrete product in and of itself, not a technical component. The correct way of looking at it, I think, is as a technical component. Now it was coded and delivered on a largely separate schedule to the rest of Polkadot, but I think from this point hence we really need to think of it as like an embedded part of Polkadot, as much as the parachains palette is an embedded part of Polkadot, like the palette that allows the relay chain to host and secure parachains. And if we start thinking about the bridge less as a bridge, and more as like an interface into the Ethereum world, then it's like Polkadot interfaces with Ethereum. We just leave it at that statement, and it's like the Polkadot hub interfaces with Ethereum, and it has products built on it that happen to interface with Ethereum, and also the Polkadot cloud has products built on it that happen to interface with Ethereum. It's just Polkadot interfaces with Ethereum. It's like part of the Polkadot underlying service, as sure as like the validators are part of the help provide the Polkadot service. So I suppose if you're like desperate for put it in one category or the other, it's part of the Polkadot cloud, or rather it's part of the Polkadot cloud machinery. And the slight thing I think is a little off is that it's not part of Hub because it's somehow easy to build products on, or that somehow the bridge itself is a Hub product. It's not a product. Like products could be built that will make use in terms of underlying tech of the bridge, but it's not a product in and itself. And this is, I think, is a bit of a it's currently an issue with the delivery of the bridge. And it's like, well, it's delivered. Why is there no usage? Well, the usage is we've delivered this interface. We've increased the capabilities of Polkadot, but no product has yet been delivered. And it's a relatively easy step to getting product or products delivered. And as you said, Joe, it's like, we may want to develop things on the hub, which, facilitate easy interaction into the Ethereum world, like totally should. But the bridge in and of itself is a technical component, not a product. And therefore, I don't think it belongs in this sense under the umbrella of the hub. I think it's more akin to an additional piece of functionality that the Polkadot cloud provides.
All right. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I was thinking about this in the context of listing the different services that are available in the Polkadot cloud, and then I was coming to the topic of bridges. And we have a Bitcoin bridge, we have a Pendulum bridge, we have a Snow bridge, and then there is Hyperbridge, which is bridging to multiple networks. And so for me, the question was, should we treat Snow bridges somehow different than those other bridges? And in my opinion, it's one of the different bridges that Polkadot currently has.
I mean, not all bridges are equal. The Bitcoin bridge is, I would say, not really a bridge at all. I mean, it's basically just a heavily collateralized financial contract. I haven't taken a super deep look into Hyperbridge, and I don't know very much at all about Pendulum Bridge. But bridges are not created equal, right? So it's not viewing Snowbridge, which is an extremely, I think even calling Snowbridge a bridge leads to a psychological issue, because it instantly makes us compare it and assume that it's the same fundamental thing as bridges, wormhole, for example. These like highly trustful bridges. In fact, I would argue Snowbridge is more akin to the functionality that allows Ethereum L2s to sit on Ethereum than it is to Wormhole, functionality that allows Ethereum to talk to other networks. And I think approaching Snowbridge like this would be a pretty sensible thing to do. So try to stop thinking of this as like a bridge and more as like an interface or an integration. I'd much prefer the interface integration language to bridge. Bridge seems overly us and them and isolating. And I think I don't think this is particularly helpful, at least not on a strategic or conceptual perspective. And I think even at a technical perspective, it can lead to incorrect technical decisions being made on the basis of a misunderstanding of capabilities.
Yeah, not all bridges are created equal. It's a little bit question of what kind of bridge it is, and I think we should need to get more specific in the language here. Okay, but that's a separate discussion. Okay, thank you for that point, Gavin. Maybe on the topic, not sure, do we have Adrian today? Don't think we have Adrian today. I wanted to tap a little bit into Snowbridge and XCM. Is there someone else who can talk a little bit about our bridges or XCM efforts?
I can talk about them.
All right.
More on the XCM side, but
yeah, welcome, Francisco.
Thanks. So do you want to? I guess you want to know latest developments. We, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but we designed along with the Snowfork team version 2 of Snowbridge, which is a lot of features from XCM v5, which is now, I think, live on the testnet on Western. And it has some things. So it is on Polkadot SDK stable 24.12, which is gonna be released on the last month. It has a few nice features that many people have been wanting, like mixing reserve asset transfers and teleports. So now cross-chain transfers are as easy as they should have been at the start. You no longer need to specify the weight when you do a transact, which is something that has led to a lot of bugs. And then delivery fees will be fully integrated, so we no longer have the bugs that we had before. And it's meant to play well with the new runtime APIs that we have for dry running and estimating fees, which we already see some integrations being made, which is awesome. And yeah, based on XCM v5, after that, development of Snowbridge v2 will be able to start getting on Polkadot, which will have lower fees and let you transfer Polkadot native assets to Ethereum will happen, and more.
Great, thank you, Cisco. What's the timeline?
So the timeline is v5 is already like in the release. Whenever the next fellowship runtimes release happens, it will go there. So probably, I don't know when that will be, January, February, that will have v5. And then I don't know if we'll be able to put Snowbridge v2 on the same one, else it will be on the next one.
Interesting.
But
And
that will be Q1.
Q1, okay.
I can't talk about Snowbridge V2 that much, but XEM V5, yeah, for sure.
So last time Adrian talked about complex asset transfer support and empowered cross-chain origins, and he explained a little bit what he meant. Is this already part of the V5 release that you're referring to?
Yeah, that's true. Now we are preserving the origin, or we leave the option of preserving the origin when you just do a reserve asset transfer going through Asset Hub, for example, or going through Asset Hub as a reserve. We allow now to preserve the origin so that people can do one transfer and the transact on the same message. Yeah, which many people have been wanting.
All right, so ready for the next release. Very good, very good. Looking forward to it. There is a question that I had on my mind, which is the Polkadot Kusama bridge. It's a little bit referring also to the discussion that Gavin raised in terms of how the usage is. So in terms of the Polkadot Kusama bridge, do we have any kind of monitoring, or do we know how much it is used and leveraged so far?
I don't know how much it's being used. I haven't been looking into it. So, yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you, Sister. Okay, then I would say let's lead over to the next bigger theme, which is everything that we do on the scaling front. So Coretime, async backing, elastic scaling, and I see Andre here. So Andre, can you share a little bit of your work in this area in the last month? And if there's other people to call on that might also share something interesting, it would be great if you also can add them to the conversation.
Okay, so yeah, there are a couple of things I want to talk about. The most exciting one probably is we deployed the test parachain on Kusama for the first time, and it has balances in the pseudo palette. And we used a transaction generator with some pre-funded accounts. So kind of got 1K TPS with just a single core. And then we tested elastic scaling with 3 cores. So we got around 2.5K, maximum 3K TPS, but like it's not that stable. But overall, it's around like, I don't know, a bit above 2.5. So that was impressive. So we never tested in such an environment before. We just like did on testnets, and yeah, we never deployed one in like a real network with 1K validators, 500 para validators, 100 cores. So yeah, that's like super exciting for me. I think for everyone. And then there's like the current work that we're doing for elastic scaling. So like the MVP was just making it work. Like the RFC 103 implementation aims to make it more robust and more secure. So we implemented all of the changes. They're like in merge in master. They're going to be in the next stable SDK release. Meanwhile, we started testing. We managed to get like end-to-end tests to work successfully with ZombieNet. They're going to be part of the CI. Audits have started, I think, around 2 weeks ago. So far, no findings that have not yet been fixed. Now, what's missing to launch on Polkadot? That's like, I think just 2 things. Like it's dynamic async backing parameters. Like we already started working on deprecating the static parameters. Like documentation and like, yeah, getting these changes enacted on the relay chain. Yeah. Now for further work, yeah, we got those nice numbers on Kusama, but using like the reference hardware, but like there was one single collator. So like what we want to do next is make it fast. So like the collator should be much faster and more reliable to build these blocks very fast. yeah, so to even come close to the numbers that we got on Kusama, like with multiple collators, we plan to have like a functional implementation of transaction streaming early next year. Like what transaction streaming does is it allows collator for a more streamlined block production. So like they don't have to wait to import the previous block before they build their own block in their own slot, because the slot is very short, like 2 seconds for the test we're doing on Kusama. So we have a high-level design and discussion on a GitHub ticket, but like those, I think is very good. Like we have a good mental model on how it should work and what are the limitations, like in theory at least. Like most important limitation, I think, is like the more geographically decentralized the collators are, the lower the TPS you're able to get, at least with the rest of the tech stack we have. Other things we can do to improve it would be faster, beefier, like CPUs, machines in general. So like someone on the team actually found such a machine. It was building like blocks in 800 milliseconds, which otherwise would take like close to 2 seconds. So that's quite good. But like this only works if like the entirety of the parachain state fits in memory. So like if you need to go to the disk, then it's becomes slower. And even for that, like longer term, like there are options like NOMT, like a faster state try, which also gives shorter proofs. Like could improve the throughput of a single core in general. So kind of this benefits elastic scaling and everything overall. Yeah, I think this is all I wanted to talk about. Are there any questions on anything?
Hey, so first of all, congrats to getting this project to a stage where you can run it on Kusama. It must be really exciting when you hit run and then you see the transactions going through.
Yeah, this was like a team effort. So congratulations to everyone who worked on this. It's quite amazing.
Very cool. So you mentioned NOMT. Is it part of an active effort, or is it sort of a backlog item that could be touched in the future?
I think it will be touched in the future. I think like I just don't. Details are fuzzy for me on this, but I think some things are still missing for our use case. So I just don't know. We will see next year. It's on the roadmap.
Okay. One detailed question: when a collator is a single collator producing like all the blocks that you need to fit in a 6-second relay chain block and then sending them to the relay chain, or is it like producing the small blocks that go to the individual cores?
It produces like, there's a 2-second slot, like sequentially. So it builds like after 2 seconds have passed, like the block is full basically. You get one block and then it builds like another one. It depends like, you know, how much stuff you have to put in the block. Like if it's full, you're going to send it at the end of the slot, basically, at the end of your 2 seconds. So it's a single collator. This is like just streamlined. We just like push out blocks.
So my question is more like, do different collators produce the different 2-second blocks that then go into a 1-second relay chain block? Or is it one collator that builds all the small pair blocks that go then into one relay chain block?
Okay. Yeah, that might feel like an optimization, like 3 blocks built by the same collator, but it's doable. Nowadays, like one collator builds one block.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. I have a question. I'm not sure where it fits in our conversation today, but Basti, last time you reported on working on 500 millisecond blocks. And I'm not sure if it related to this discussion or if it is a separate discussion and in which project this is part of. So can you share a little bit about this?
Yes, I mean, I would say you're right. It fits into this this project here. I mean, it's a little bit. It's not depending on the relay chain. It's more like optimization on the parachain side. But yeah, with what Andre just presented, like this is when we have elastic scaling and can use 3 blocks, then you can then you actually get like much more time per block, which gives you like more transactions per block. So yeah. Yeah, I'm working on it. I think I've opened 2 PRs so far, which are waiting for some reviews, and I have otherwise I know most of the things how they should work, but yeah. I think over time I realized some things, like, for example, what Andre just said about like when we have like this transaction streaming and we actually like building all the time a block, like, so like actually like we're only applying transactions, we could change like a little bit the reporting, because like currently when, for example, we report to the outside, yeah, your transaction was included when like the block is like kind of finished, but we could maybe do the reporting directly after the transaction was added to a block or whatever. So it gives a little bit more or like even faster feedback to the user. Something that I'm not sure if that brings that much, but because you're probably waiting for the state, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to see this phenomenon happen in multiple places at the same time. So I've listened to the presentation that Gavin gave at SubZero, and I think that one important mindset shift that you have to do is to understand that not everything is happening because it's not coherent. You can basically decouple it and parallelize parts of the execution, or basically you can decouple different pipelines and how they're streaming data through, right? And so the topic you're working on is somewhat separate, I suppose, but it's also, it taps into the same way of thinking of, okay, actually we don't need to wait. If we can decouple certain processes, we don't have to wait on the finalization or the execution of the previous step before we start, for example, streaming new blocks or working on the next block.
Yeah, I would probably say it goes a little bit in this direction of Sui and all these blockchain. Like, I mean, they have these Tangle. I'm not that deep into them, but I mean, like, they know, like, they have like your transaction needs to confirm multiple transactions. Then you have like these kind of validators, which are then like, I think they shard based on objects. So like when one transaction is modified, like multiple transactions that modify the same object need to go into like the same kind of stream or whatever, and then like, yeah. But here with this 500 milliseconds, we're not really like, it's not a scaling. It's more like giving faster feedback to the user, because like in the end it's just about like you do your whatever your degenerated DeFi whatever thing you're doing there, and you want to have a fast feedback. You want to get like the reward or whatever you're doing there. So like waiting like 6 seconds or like waiting before like 12 seconds before your transaction gets applied, it's like quite a long time. If you look at like what we have in the centralized world with like these, what's it called, the fast trade, like I forgot the name, I have it in my brain, but like these really fast trading at the exchanges and whatever. So like all these things, which is currently not that easy in our decentralized world, but yeah, I think it's something people are waiting for, and yeah, probably also brings advantages on like reducing arbitrage and all these kind of things. But yeah, because you get less time to think about where you can squeeze out some money.
It's performance improvements everywhere you look right now. All right, thank you, Basti. Thank you, Andre. Gavin, I want to involve you a little bit in the conversation, and I want to start with a smaller topic first, which is there has been a proposal for Kusama to introduce a minimum price for cores. So the argument basically was that there is a minimum cost to operate the network, and so there should also be a minimum. It's just basically the validator cost number times the number of validators. And so the argument is there should be a minimum price to cores. What's your thought on
that? Well, the business world has something called a loss leader, which is, attempting to gain market share by selling a service or product at less than its value of production, or less than the cost of production. I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say whether we're past the sort of loss leader period and actually the price is just too low and should increase, but I guess it's like what's actually the point of this? Like, what is this change expected to do? Like, how is it expected to help? Is it, it's like, is the few extra KSM in the treasury actually going to make any significant difference economically, like to the tokenomics? See it. So I mean, maybe, but maybe it will also massively reduce the usage. I mean, if Kusama is the experimental network and it's meant to be there for people to run random stuff on at relatively low barriers to entry. So if you jack up the minimum price, and I don't know by how much, right? I mean, it goes from like 1 cent per slice to 1.1 cent per slice. It's probably not going to make any real difference, but presumably they're talking about more than this. In which case, you've got to do a proper, you've got to think hard about whether increasing the price is going to have a good effect on the overall tokenomics or a detrimental effect. I mean, another possibility is to make it free, right? And just say, well, look, we don't actually need to take any money right now. The money that we're taking is so little, like the tokens we're taking is so little that we may as well just say it's free and market this point, get this point across in communications. Kusama has free block space. Maybe it's like not free, not you don't give it away free, but you just remove the minimum, so it could be free. So I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm a little skeptical that increasing the price, putting the minimum price such that the effective price is increased very little, will do anything at all. And increasing the minimum price so that it's actually substantially higher, therefore represents a barrier to entry, will be a positive change. I can't really see it being a positive change.
Yeah, my understanding is that some people were worried that if the price gets very cheap and then one entity starts holding all the cores and for a very long time could sit on the very cheap renewal costs and basically block out the cores for other entities before the renewal costs that would drive up the price too much.
It's activity, isn't it? I mean, this is the sort of thing that Kusama is for. Like, honestly, if they take over all the cores, it's like, this is like kind of funny, and it's easy for governance just to put something through that like kicks them off, right? If it's obviously detrimental behavior to the network, so reset the minimum price to something sensible. But like, I think this is the sort of thing Kusama's for, right? Like, and honestly, if someone is like coming up with scripts and investing KSM in actually running this experiment, then like I say, let them do it.
Yeah, okay. To me, it sounds very convincing how you present it. All right. Okay. So, Gavin, while we have you here, how about we talk about Jam a little bit? It's our favorite topic to come to every month.
Sure. So we had a bit of a first international get together of the Jam teams.
Sorry, just a second. I saw that Donald had his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the pricing discussion. I think that the minimum price, I agree that doesn't really change much. Like I can see the logic of raising that, making it more expensive for people who aren't going to put it to active work. But with a functioning secondary market, all it needs to happen is if somebody's buying loads of cores speculatively, then that just drives up the price in the secondary market, where people will offer more for the cores that this other person owns. And so you do get a self-correction. And like if you have it, I think that if people are the things that people should be aiming to change are the pricing mechanism, because I do think that there is an issue with the pricing mechanism with more cores that currently we don't have on Polkadot, but it's the same on Polkadot and Kusama. So the data we're getting from Kusama could be seen as being useful for feeding into the Polkadot pricing model. and it's something we've been looking into, like, and just talking about the next stage of the pricing mechanism, because currently it's a bit of a kind of broad strokes kind of, if the last core that was sold, or if the last core is sold, you take that price and that's what you base your next sale price on. And that's fine if you've got like expected, if you're getting your expected usage. But on Kusama, we pumped up the number of cores and didn't decrease what is, like we say, the ideal number of cores sold per sale. And so it means that we have all these cores that are remaining unsold, and so people are just picking them up just for a laugh, just to have the NFT or whatever it is. Whereas if you have a smaller number of cores, or even if you just base the pricing mechanism on a smaller number of cores, saying this is the number we expect to sell. If we sell more than this, then the price is lower than the actual market price. And if we sell fewer than this, then the price is too high. And so, like, by tweaking that, instead of setting a minimum price, because like the DOT or the KSM in this case gets burnt, and like Gav was saying, it's a tiny amount. It has no real, it's a drop in the ocean. And so basing it on the cost of the production doesn't really end up with the people who produce it. So it doesn't give any incentive for people to contribute their cores or contribute their hardware to allow us to have more cores. And if we're thinking about like a okay, I'll not go into some deep hole here, but I think, yeah, floor prices won't solve the problem that people think they'll solve. I think it'll increase the barrier to entry, like I've said, but it'll also just it'll increase the floor while not removing the problem. It'll just make it slightly more expensive. But in reality, you're not going to make it super high, because then actual products, like real projects, will have higher operating costs to no gain from the network. So I think, yeah, in summary, new pricing adapter, new mechanism for adapting the prices between sales and how it changes within the sale, I think are the way forward if people disagree with how it works right now.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into the deeper tokenomics discussion, where actually if you pay for a core, you're paying for liveness. But the way it's solved currently is that the price for a core goes to a protocol which burns it, and then at the same time it means new tokens to give to validators. So, I mean, if you would think it even further, you could even at some point say, why does the cost of production not directly go to the validators? And you might not even need inflation at a certain point.
Yeah, but the point of having a token economy, one of the really big points of having a token economy anyway, is that you can absorb differences between supply and demand. Right? So it's like, if there are periods where validators need to be paid less, it means that you don't, for whatever reason, it means that you don't necessarily have to decrease the cost. And similarly, if there are periods where validators have to be paid more in aggregate, then it means you don't have to necessarily expose that to your consumers and increase the prices, right? It's like the pricing mechanism can be a strategic thing that is where cost is only one factor. And, the ability to market a successful product is a more important factor. If you tie yourself to requiring at any given time level price like aggregate revenue to be equal to aggregate cost of production, you will screw yourself. So I find that this argument falls pretty flat unless there's like some really important reason. Like, for example, your economy is in total free fall, you got hyperinflation and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, maybe then you need to actually look at doing some sort of responsible cost management. But like, I think in this case, particularly a network like Kusama, that lives on the edge, should be. But it doesn't. This argument really doesn't make very much sense. Like, this kind of fiscal responsibility argument. I don't really see it. I mean, eventually, yes, maybe if Kusama gives up its experimental nature and just becomes a member of the establishment and wants to run a tightly controlled, very I don't know, an economy that sort of guarantees long haul stability, and doesn't care about price fluctuations that it's offering its service customers. But I really don't think that's where Kusama is right.
It's a good argument about the buffering. Before I move on to Jam, Donald, maybe you notice the referendum that this discussion started to in reference. There is people are wondering if there is secondary markets already. So is it already possible to resell a core to someone else in the live version of it, of Agile Coretime?
Yeah, it's possible to sell it and transfer to somebody else, but at the minute, not in a trustless way without a secondary market. And I think that they're like the transfer extrinsics just baked into the broker palette, so you can just transfer your region NFT to anybody. And so if you had a smart contract or a parachain or any way to trustlessly do this, then or like I've heard people floating the idea of a multi-sig batch all as a way of doing it. So yeah, I think that the first one that would go live, from what I've heard, is Region X in Q1. So they'll be going live for the full kind of reselling and all of the secondary market features.
So from the primitives that we have, do we have a possibility to have a trustless secondary market?
So yeah, from the primitives we have the possibility, but we don't. You need to have some place to actually execute to be an intermediary piece of code, whether it's a smart contract or a parachain or something a bit more I don't know, sledgehammer approach. But yeah,
I mean, you need a matching service, right? That's all that's really missing, because as you say, you can do a multi-sig batch all, and that will work. We already have trustless exchanges. That's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
So it's just about finding people that actually want to exchange and matching them together.
Okay, so we have the technical primitives for the trustless secondary marketplace, but so far no one has built, managed to build it. There are some on the way, but they are not live yet.
Yeah, so they're built and testing on, I think they're on Rococo and then now on Paseo. And yeah, so they're just waiting for a couple of things to be merged in this most recent, in the 2409, I think it is, the update that Pablo's been working on. And so, yeah, they'll be live in Q1. So I think we'll be able to do nice, shiny UIs and this binding service.
Okay, cool. Very good. Thank you, Donald. Also, thank you for raising the hand to go into the discussion. Okay. Yeah, so maybe as one last point that I'm getting the signal here, because this was in relation to this referendum that was posted. The purpose was that the minimum price is to discourage hoarders until such a service would be here. Gavin's argument was let chaos ensue, and the argument here on the other side is to basically say if we want to discourage hoarders, then there should be, until we have such a service live, there should be minimum price. Any closing arguments on this?
I would just say that free stuff is quite marketable, and it could be that when this service arises, or when the first viable matching service arises, we just say, look, we're going to reset. I'll just put a governance thing in and reset the renewal stuff to what it is today, or whatever. And that would be an equally, if it's just about this period until there's a matching service, that would be an equally good way of managing the possibility that there might be an attack by people who want to spend KSM on getting Coretime. Like, I mean, I think it's very questionable whether this can constitute an attack. I wouldn't describe this as an attack. I would describe it as legitimate usage. Like,
All right.
if there's just some assumption that the people who want to spend KSM right today are somehow gonna ignore their investment and refuse to sell their parachain, their Coretime, come the point of a matching service and just keep it to themselves and say no. Even if you will give me even if I'm going to make a $1,000 profit, I'm still going to just screw you over and not sell this thing. I mean, acceptable. Like, trusting the market is like a pretty basic assumption of cryptoeconomic systems. And if we don't trust the market is going to fix this, then it's like, go to a centralized service, go to like I don't know, some dictatorial scheme. But as far as I know, in this industry, we kind of trust the market to be effective. And as Daniel says, like, this is we should ultimately be able to. It should be ultimately be self-correct.
I think something I say every time this comes up is, like, if trolls value Coretime more highly than legitimate projects, then we have bigger problems than setting low caps or like floor prices. I think if you as a project want to get Coretime and you worry about it being hoarded, then you need to put a higher price on it. And that's how the market works.
All right. Okay. Thank you for the conversation. It was really insightful. Sometimes fun to play with these extreme values. Okay, now moving on to Jam. Gavin, what's new? What's happened? I saw some updates from your latest talk in SubZero. What's here relevant for the fellowship?
What's relevant for the fellowship? Not really. So I mean, I'll give some updates anyway. We SubZero, we had a jam day, and we sort of had a jam weekend as well. I was there then 9th, 10th, 11th, and we it's the first proper big-ish international meetup between jam teams. I think there were 12 or 13 teams there. And yeah, we had a few different sessions. There was pretty good vibe. Like, people are pretty excited, particularly to start getting their clients interoperating. I think some progress was made there. Although I left on the 11th, and it sort of continued for another 4 or 5 days afterwards. So I didn't see the end of that. Do we have anyone else? Any other jam implementers that stayed the course on the call? No? Okay. What else? So most of my efforts have been going into the grey paper, pushing to the 0.50 release, which introduces a few important changes, not least 64-bit PVM definition, which took a little bit to and fro to get right. That's now released. Actually released very hot off the press. I think it was released about half an hour ago. So that's you go to the GitHub repo, you'll see the 0.50 now is the latest release. There are a few other bits in it that were important tweaks coming from implementation discoveries, basically optimization, vertical optimizations that will allow us to do certain things better. So I don't know how useful it is to go into the technical nitty-gritty, but yeah, if you're interested, then go to the grey paper repo and check the 0.50 release notes, and you can find the various changes that went into there. We are moving forward on one of the elements towards core play, which is this is really why Jam is good, right? Because it can support a system like CorePlay, which basically means continuations. So this is why we like the PVM. It's got essentially a memory model, which is sticks everything in sort of one space, apart from code, but that's fine. In particular, stack and heap and read-only stuff. It's like in the same space, and it means that you can do, as Sean has just posted here, you can save the state of the VM very easily, and particularly as we've made the Jam DA be the same size as the as a PVM memory page. It turns out that you can save the state of the PVM instance into the Jam DA and then reload it really easily. And because you can save the state of the PVM and reload it in a later block, and because we're only using the DA and not the on-chain storage, this allows us to have lots and lots and lots and lots, at least in principle, we hope to test this soon, lots and lots and lots and lots of PVM continuations. So basically instances of the PVM that are running their code and have, you know, paused, suspended, and will be resumed in later blocks as they are needed. And this is a yeah, and this is a very useful sort of primitive to have, a very useful computation model. And as Sean has just written there, although Jam cores, Jam blocks have a limited amount of gas, and you have to basically finish up your work within that limit, just the same as an Ethereum transaction or any other blockchain transaction. With CorePlay, which is like a sort of layer 2, if you like, on Jam, a Jam service, we can relax this because we have continuations, which means you can write programs that just have infinite loops, and they'll just go on, and it will work, and it will, you know, do as much as it can in a blockchain block, and then continue if it needs to in the next block. And from the perspective of the programmer and the perspective of the user, it's just continuous. It's just executing. You don't see the blockchain. You don't see block boundaries, right? We are starting to move blockchain from being a product in and of itself to an implementation detail, and this is like a really big step. And so it's something I'm pretty excited about. So we're not moving directly into CorePlay because CorePlay has a few moving pieces, some of which we don't properly understand how we're going to do. But the first stop to CorePlay is what we're calling CoreVM, and CoreVM is essentially running a PVM continuation on a core. So we're going to ignore the fact that we might want to compose these synchronously, and we're going to ignore the fact that we might have many different sort of builders who want to all sort of come in and help compose these things. And instead, we're just going to say it's a single builder running a single VM that just wants to be run over and over. And our ultimate goal is to use CoreVM to run the intro of Dune and basically leave the frame buffer in the DA, so that you can then go onto, you know, using a Jam DA, any Jam sort of node, and then query the DA and fetch random frames from Dune. And this would actually use Jam, like the Jam supercomputer, to calculate these frames, right? So you just have the Doom executable sitting, like, compiled to PVM, sitting in a Jam core, executing and just continuing to execute. Yeah, so that's the overall goal of the CoreVM project, and the project has started, and we're starting to sort of see how the code is going to look. What else? Yeah, I presented a roadmap of how I see things going from grey paper, from where we are in the grey paper, from the Jam protocol spec, all the way to 1.0, which I can give a quick overview here. So 0.5 is basically these initial implementation tweaks, tweaks to the protocol that we make because of the implementation, after gaining insight into the protocol from the implementation. And there's a few changes that we want to make in 0.5 that'll probably happen over the coming weeks as we do minor releases of 0.5, and then 0.6 is likely to be mostly grey paper, kind of formalism changes, just cleanups to the formalism, make it more readable, make it tidy up some things, add some additional clarity over things like how grandpa works with it. 0.7 and 0.8 are basically planned to be additional alterations to the protocol on the basis of new understanding coming from it running on the Jam toaster. So basically, we've got lots of nodes all trying to interact with each other. And there will probably be some protocol changes that we need to make in order to optimize that once we understand the emergent effects of having not just one node running through blocks, but like 1,000 nodes all trying to interact with each other to kind of give this emergent supercomputer. And also services. As we build services and deploy them onto Jam instances, we will almost certainly want to make alterations to the underlying protocol to optimize those services. It's a little hard to do that at the moment because we don't really know how the services are going to look, what sort of patterns they're going to use, patterns of interaction with Jam. Things like service synchronous composition is still in a relatively early stage of consideration. And we'll probably, as we start building services, we'll be able to sort of understand a lot better if additional primitives are needed or tweaks to the protocol are needed in order to make this work as well as it can. 0.9 will be basically the version that gets deployed as the Kusama Jam chain. Assuming Kusama is up for it, they probably should put a governance proposal in to check.
People were already asking if Jam is also going to run on Kusama. So I would say this is a good suggestion to run it on Kusama first, right?
Yeah, I mean it makes sense. It's just it should go through a request for change or whatever. And it will be the version of Jam that gets sent to the auditors, the version of the grey paper that gets sent to the auditors for final check on soundness and so on. 1.0 will be the post-audit spec. And yeah, I mean, in terms of timeline, the target is second half of next year for having a final implementation, like a viable implementation, production implementation. And therefore the protocol would need to be finalized by the end of the first half of next year. So this is still where where in my mind at least, I'm targeting. Wanting to have 3 independent implementations that are sufficiently fast, all within, let's say, 5 or 10% of the fastest implementation, is still the goal. It may draw out the launch a little bit as teams need, sort of racing to get to this 5 or 10% speed margin. But we'll have to see. I think a lot of I think there's only really going to be a few difficult bottlenecks. One of them will be the PVM implementation. One possibility is to relax or at least provide for a possibility of being an independent implementation that could be a launch implementation whilst using the PokerVM PVM implementation as an FFI, a foreign interface, basically pulling in the fast implementation and not requiring teams to make their own for the purpose of being a launch implementation.
So while we're at this, is there any teams that are already hopeful they could make it to the target? Any teams to mention especially?
I mean, I think there's a few that are, playing for the big prize. I think where I have my Jam teams. Let's have a look. Clients. So I think if you look at chains that are written in like C, C++, Go, Rust, Zig, Swift, you probably see teams that are really keen on getting to milestone 5. So I would say like Boca, the Swift implementation, probably like Gossamer, Jamtuna. That's probably kind of interested. Block Cowboys. I mean, there were quite a few of them that showed up to the SubZero sort of jam day, and I guess many of them will be very interested to try and get to milestone 5 and actually be a launch implementation. But I mean, I don't know. Well, we should really, I guess, maybe following M1 when teams start going getting past on this first milestone, and therefore collecting a fellowship position. I guess they're going to probably come into this call, and we'll maybe have a bigger segment on jam implementation news. But
So
for now,
what's SIG? I haven't heard about it before. Is it a competitor to Rust or so?
Yeah, it's another language. It's a little bit. It's even more explicit than Rust. Even more sort of. I don't know. I would say, having looked at the code samples, it seems like a quite lower level language than Rust. But as I understand it, and maybe someone who is more familiar with it can chime in, it has quite an extensive ability for doing metaprogramming. So you can basically program your program to be generated, and this means that although it's lower level, you can still have high level constructs relatively easily. You just code them yourself.
And they say Rust is closest to the metal. Now SIG comes along.
I mean, I mean, Rust also has this, right? And it had this syntax trait a while back, and now it's got like proper procedural macros, which do a fairly similar thing. But I think they're maybe a little more of a pain to use than Zig's, procedural code generation, which I guess was kind of one of the main aspects of the language.
I was so proud of learning Rust because I was just starting to get into ink, and now something else comes along.
Well, I mean, the kind of the point of at least moving to PVM broadly is that we're not tying ourselves to a particular code implementation language. Like we're not saying you have to, if you want to do stuff on Polkadot, you have to learn Rust. Like in principle, with Jam, at least you can code services in anything that can be compiled into OSTV PVM, and this is basically anything. I mean, anything without a runtime.
All right. Okay. Maybe 2 questions that I have here. So Jam SDK, you teased it a bit. You said it's going to be very minimal. What will it contain initially?
Yeah, that's the other thing that has had some activity. Initially, it will basically just be a trait that has accumulate, refine, and on transfer functions, and you kind of implement these functions and build your trait implementation, and you'll get a blob of PVM code out that you then can upload, and it's just a service. So this is like the version 0.1 or whatever of Jam SDK. This is all you need, but it's probably not all you want. And there's probably going to be quite a lot of additional logic and sort of code infrastructure that will be shared across services. This, needs to be, these patterns need to be well understood, and APIs designed to use them, and then that should eventually make its way into the SDK. And we're going to have stuff like cross-service composition, synchronous and asynchronous inter-service messaging or inter-service composition. We're going to have the ability for services to interact with parachains. Maybe some concept of sharded services, like kind of what do we have? A spree style, their chords, this kind of thing. And ultimately, we'll need the SDK to include probably some means of actually building work package builders, of like kind of making executables that use Jam nodes in order to build work packages for your service. So it's not just about coding the service. You have to code the things that have an internal state, which allow them to build work packages. Because as you were saying, rewind, I don't know, 5 or 6 conversation topics back, this asynchronous block collation that we're now starting to tackle, as we want to increase performance on the current generation Polkadot, this needs to be tackled just as much in next generation Polkadot, like Jam. Only with Jam, it's working at the level below. It's working at like any kind of work package building, but it's the same problem, and it's essentially asynchronous, like creating primitives that allow us to handle the asynchronous nature of work pipelining. It's like you have your work package, and it's going to pipeline its way through until it eventually gets finalized, right? It eventually makes its way on chain, gets verified and finalized. But you can't look at the current final state of the chain to build the next work package, because it's going to take a while to move through that pipeline. Yeah. And therefore we need to have a state of the world that is modeling what that pipeline will look like the end of that pipeline will look like when this one gets finalized, when your next one gets finalized. And to do this in a general fashion is probably quite hard. But nonetheless, this is what the SDK should attempt to facilitate, this concept of essentially modeling the state of the world as it will be when this work package is eventually going to be at the end of the pipeline, so that you can build it sensibly at the start of the pipeline.
Yeah, and you need to start somewhere. You need to get your feet wet and basically get it out, so that you can also build your first service, which is going to be core boot. So it's anticipated to be in the first version this year.
Yeah, I've just spent a little bit of time cleaning up the repo names and getting things in order. It's the target is to be able to build core boot yourself. I don't know, in a week, right? Next week. Already we can build it, but it's kind of the bit that builds it is sort of part of Polka Jam, which they don't want to release until other M1 candidates are sort of ready. Like, at least let's get people to M1 before putting a sort of pseudo quasi reference implement. I don't want to call it a reference. It's not a reference implementation, but the problem is people might use it as a reference implementation, and this is a big issue, right? So that's why we don't want to put the code out there. We're not trying to be just bastards. We actually want to try and get people to implement it from the spec.
Good. Thank you very much, Gavin. Before I let you go, one more question. What about individuality? Where is this project right now?
Yeah, things are moving on with this. I mean, obviously, with talking of pipelines, there is a Polkadot pipeline of like getting changes onto the Polkadot mainnet and its system chains that is fairly long these days. And we needed, like, individuality needed a number of changes that were quite core to the protocol, like, for example, transaction extension. So this is this will take some time. We are largely finished with DIM 1 and are now really focusing on DIM 2 and a little bit. We haven't really started DIM 3 yet, like in terms of final design, but DIM 2 is sort of is moving along now. And the interesting thing is that individuality is really pushing other aspects of, if you like, the Polkadot stack, like the Polkadot cloud, forward. In particular, data publication and messaging. So we have the bulletin chain for midterm, like not short to midterm data publication, like 2 weeks, and this is being used. Now it's actually, you know, functional, and we expect it to be really moving into production as DIM 1 launches. And one of the things I'm very excited that individuality is pushing out is this message signaling that happens outside of any of the blockchain. So essentially, if you remember way back when there was this idea of like building Whisper, which would be this like non coherent messaging layer that looked a little bit like the transaction gossiping layer. So essentially signed messages that got gossiped between nodes, and then you could look at what was in the message pool. Fairly similar, but with a bit more cryptoeconomic soundness, because you have to basically sign it with accounts that are allowed to send messages. And then what makes an account be able to send a message? Well, that's application dependent, but in principle, the application can limit it to the active participants in whatever the message, the service that the message is. In our case, we're using it to exchange details of the endpoints, the technical endpoints of video chat, because it turns out that we need to be able to do video chats between participants, and we want to do this in a decentralized manner. And you can't really use a blockchain for the level of participants that we want, and we don't want to do a centralized service. And so, basically, although this wasn't built for the individuality project, it's a really good use case for the individuality project, and it's like kicking our asses to actually get the thing out into production and like actually used. And actually, in the last week or two, we had the first proper sort of implementation and benchmarking of it, and it's doing what we need to do very nicely. I think it's like in the tens of thousands of different messages being sent, and they arrive, and it's all good. So we're very happy that we're sort of at the first point of production grade performance for this service.
Okay, now you got me curious. Gavin, is this going to be a product? Is it like a Polkadot cloud service, or is this more like is this going to be fellowship territory?
This is definitely Polkadot Hub. This is a Polkadot Hub native service. So it's here to build community. It's here to provide not NFTs because they're not transferable, but like non-transferable tokens to non-fungible tokens to people that sort of guarantee their individuality and allow them to use other services. But it's not really going to be directly useful on the cloud. It's very much a hub.
Interesting. All right. Okay. Thank you, Gavin, for that update. There were quite a few interesting things there. Yeah, I want to move on, and I'm calling you, Pablo. You wanted to raise a point regarding PR 490, which is the update to the SDK stable 2409.1.
Yes. As of now, I've received enough reviews that are required to merge it. I appreciate that very much. Basically, the update to the stable 24.9 version includes several updates to the runtimes, but most the two most important one then might be probably the nomination pools update and yeah, and the introduction of the dynamic lanes in the bridge. So that's quite cool. Yeah.
All right. So it's a pull request. So once the pull request is in, will it also include the voting and nomination pools for the next release automatically, or is there still integration work going on then?
And I think will be more of responding that.
So sorry, I didn't get it. Is that a yes or no? More like a...
Maybe I could answer that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the upgrade will migrate all the pools. We have a like off-chain bot to migrate every member individually, but I mean, that should be transparent for users, so users don't have to do anything. So I suspect like once we have the upgrade in a couple of hours, like everybody should be able to use their pool funds for voting.
Right, and so if that PR goes through, is the voting and nomination pools feature, is it automatic? Is it already part of the PR, or is it a follow-up PR?
No, it's part of that runtime.
Cool. And
that PR.
Does it still need some reviews or votes, or is it already merged?
Yeah, I think it has a lot of reviews already.
Okay, so it can be part of the next release, right?
Yeah. I mean, it has to be part of the next release, but because this is the upgrade to the next SDK version. But this will not bump up the release. So this is just one PR.
Yeah.
And maybe there will be a follow-up PR to actually bump up the release version and then apply, like propose the release.
Right. Okay. Do we already know when the next release is going to come?
That's kind of up to fellowship. Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, soon, hopefully.
Yeah, the plan was that this upgrade or update is being done this year, so like in December.
This year, Christmas update.
Christmas update, yes, on the 24th. Breaking Polkadot and having their say. No, but I mean, like, yeah, that's the like, yeah. I think that would be good.
Then I would add another question, which is the other most important community question right after voting and nomination pools is, when is fast unstaking coming? Do we have any update on that?
Yeah, I mean, Ross, he's also part of fellowship. He's working on that. I think there have been few discussions with like Web3 Foundation team and all about some security implication, but I think it's pretty early. I have a PR, I can just link it if you guys want to follow. But I would say it's still there is some way to go before it can be reviewed or merged.
Okay,
there are some discussions around the security, but it's like the security discussions are like a little bit, like from what I heard, it's not like that critical and like stuff that can be solved, or maybe we need to increase a little bit the time from 2 days to 4 days or whatever. But yeah, from the actual implementation, there's not like, yeah, no problem in like, yeah, how it should be working. So we see, and
all right. Okay, thank you for those inputs. So then in chat, Donald raised a comment. I believe it's not directly related to that conversation. Donald, do you want to say something in it, or should I just reflect on what it shows here?
It's just that Ken asked me he couldn't make it, so we just wanted people to be directed towards this issue, discussing the D-Day/Doomsday governance. I've written in the chat here, but I don't know if people on the stream can see it, that it's the proposal to handle a situation with a minimal relay where Asset Hub and/or collectives stall and we need to recover from it. So it's relevant to the Plaza upgrade and it would be good to get fellows' input. So just not much to talk about in the call, but just
okay.
People's feedback.
So that's Polkadot SDK issue 5588, and Kian is asking to get some attention from the fellows on this one.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, but I also can't edit the fellowship doc. So
all right, good. Good. So then, any more comments on the issues we discussed so far? Good. Then I also have one last announcement or request from the community. So the ambassador program has been defining this feature that they would like to see, which is optimistic funding. And so it's a little bit similar nature to the other optimistic projects funding that we have, but it's different. And the idea is basically to use the fragment algorithm. So the basic idea is to have a pot of tokens, dot tokens, and then define, for example, 10 slots. And the tokens will be distributed to the 10 slots. And who these 10 recipients are should be decided by a fragment election. So the idea is that community members can vote with the dot tokens, and then the 10 highest ranking members that get voted in with the fragment algorithm would be the recipients of that. And the ambassador program is looking for a fellow that would be interested to building that. So if that is you, if you're looking for interesting thing regarding fragment and voting here, then definitely reach out because the ambassador program, the new ambassador program, would like to get this built, and I think it would be interesting. All right, these are all the announcements that we have. We discussed, I think, all the major topics. I don't see anyone else raising any other topics. So I think this brings us to the end of our call. Yeah, it's quite an interesting change to talk about Polkadot Cloud and Polkadot Hub. I think it is something that resonated with a lot of people. It's easy as a mindset to tap into, and it also relates to the other branches. So it's not only for technical folks, it's also interesting for the business folks, for the marketing folks, for the community. Everyone can understand this concept. Something that I think really elevated our conversation and simplified it. So I'm also relieved to hear that the fellowship is also excited about it and supportive of it. And I think on that note, we can end it for today. Thank you everyone for coming. Next call is gonna be slightly ahead of the holidays. It should be the 17th, Tuesday the 17th of December. So yeah, wishing all of you a good time until then. Thank you everyone for coming. Bye-bye.
That's it.
Thank you.